What if your life is not truly ruled by you, but by fear? What if the most important decisions you ever made did not come from your dreams, or your intuition, or even your reason, but from something quieter, stickier, almost invisible, yet astonishingly powerful: fear? Fear does not always roar. More often, it whispers. Softly, but with persistence. What if you fail? It asks when you are about to change your career. You will embarrass yourself. It murmurs before you confess your feelings to someone you love. Fear is a master of disguise. It can wear the mask of prudence, of caution, even of maturity. It can dress itself in the fine suit of common sense and quietly steer you far from where you truly wanted to go. When a person says, "I am simply being realistic," perhaps it is not realism at all but fear speaking with their voice. Neuroscientists such as Joseph Ledoux have shown that the amygdala, that almond-shaped part of the brain, reacts to danger more quickly than the neocortex. This means that we feel fear first, and only afterwards invent explanations. Fear pulls the trigger long before reason can whisper, "Wait, this is not dangerous." When fear becomes a constant background hum, a person begins to live in survival mode. They stop dreaming, stop risking, stop opening up. Their decisions become as narrow as a corridor in the dark. The psychologist Paul Gilbert, who created compassion-focused therapy, once said that fear blocks our very capacity for compassion, even for ourselves. We grow rigid, closed, unable to grant ourselves the simple right to make mistakes. I once heard a story from an elderly woman who had lived a long life. She had dreamed of becoming an actress, but chose accounting instead, a safe profession. She was afraid of poverty, afraid of judgment. 40 years later, she stood in her kitchen and admitted, "I did not live my life. I served my fear." The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once wrote, "He who has learned how to be afraid has learned the most important thing." Paradoxically, fear can be the beginning, if we dare to look it in the eye. The first step is not to deny it, but to acknowledge it. To say honestly, "Yes, I am afraid. Afraid of change. Afraid of failure. Afraid that I will not manage." But honesty is the gateway to freedom. If you feel that you are not living your own life, ask yourself one question: what would I do if I were not afraid? The answer could change everything. Sometimes, courage is not about forcing yourself to act. Sometimes it is about simply stopping the constant running. Sitting still in silence, listening to yourself, listening to your body which has long been shouting, "I am tired of being afraid." Professor Stephen Hayes, one of the founders of acceptance and commitment therapy, says that avoiding pain is the surest path to even greater pain. When we refuse to face fear, it becomes a growing shadow. But when we look at it directly, it shrinks. Not with aggression, but with curiosity. Asking gently, "What are you showing me?" Often fear says, "You want too much." But the truth is that we rarely suffer from wanting too much. We suffer from wanting too little, and living without fire. Think of the moments when you did act despite fear. Did you not feel most alive then? It is in the overcoming that we become ourselves. Yet fear is clever. It knows that direct confrontation breeds strength, so it chooses detours. It whispers, "This is not your path. You are too tired. Wait, it is not time yet." And so, almost unnoticed, you delay your dreams. Until later. Until you feel more confident. But confidence does not come first. It is not the cause, it is the result. I once heard of a woman who wanted to start her own business. Every day she studied courses, listened to success stories, wrote down her ideas. And every evening she told herself, "I am not ready yet." 10 years passed. It was not laziness. Not stupidity. It was fear. One day she heard her 8-year-old daughter confess with worry, "Mom, I am afraid to try new things. What if people laugh at me?" And the woman realized exactly where that fear came from. We hand down fear like an inheritance. Without meaning to. Through a glance, a word, a silence. through the dreams we never dared to chase. What we abandon in ourselves can echo in the eyes of those we love most. The neuroscientist Richard Davidson studied how fear reshapes the brain. His team proved that chronic fear increases amygdala activity and weakens its connection to the prefrontal cortex. That means we lose the ability to think rationally and to plan for the long term. We begin to live as if in constant alarm, as if in a world that cannot be trusted. And when our brain cannot trust the world, we no longer play, experiment, or create. We tighten our grip, controlling everything and everyone. But behind that control lies not strength, only fear. I once met a man who had spent his entire life making choices with cold logic. He considered emotions a weakness. But at 50, he realized he did not know who he was. He had lived an entire life without ever meeting himself. His father had always said, "A real man is afraid of nothing." But that is a lie. True courage is to admit fear and to walk through it, not to hide it behind the mask of strength. The Buddha once said, "Fear never goes away until you walk into it." This does not mean charging blindly ahead. It means staying present with yourself in the very moment of fear. Not pushing it away. Not being ashamed of it. How can we do this? There is a simple yet powerful practice. When you feel fear, close your eyes. Ask yourself, where is it in my body? And just feel it. Do not analyze. Simply allow it. The psychotherapist Peter Levine called this somatic experiencing. He believed trauma does not live in the event itself, but in the body. If we allow ourselves to feel fear, it loosens its grip. Try this exercise. Every night before sleep, write down one thing you did today despite fear. Even if it was only a thought. That alone is victory. Our culture glorifies fearlessness. But the fearless person is either a myth or a psychopath. A living person feels fear. A brave one is not the one who does not fear, but the one who walks forward with trembling legs. I once heard a cancer survivor say, "The scariest thing was not the illness. It was realizing that I had never lived my own life. Everything was for someone else. Everything was by someone else's rules. When death came close, I wanted nothing more than to finally be myself." We wait for permission, as if someone will appear and tell us, "You may. You may dream. You may leave. You may try." But that someone is you. Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote, "Man is condemned to be free." The phrase sounds frightening, yet it hides the key. Freedom demands courage. But only freedom gives life its taste. If you wake up in the morning and feel emptiness, it is not because something is broken in you. Perhaps you are simply living by the script of fear, and your body, your soul, are rebelling. Sometimes all it takes is asking, what if I were 10% braver, what would I do? Not 100%. Just 10. That is already enough to begin. When fear becomes constant, the brain loses its ability to distinguish real threat from imagined. Harvard and MIT researchers showed that under chronic stress the neural circuits of the amygdala grow hypersensitive. The amygdala is our ancient alarm bell, tuned for fight or flight. It reacts faster than the cortex that analyzes and reasons. If fear is triggered constantly, the cortex shuts down. That is why, in moments of anxiety, it is so hard to think clearly. Why we make impulsive choices, say words we regret, postpone steps we know we must take. It feels as though we lose ourselves. With chronic fear, the hippocampus, our memory center, shrinks. We forget new information more easily, we cannot focus. Attention is consumed not by growth, but by survival. The psychiatrist Bessel van der Kolk, author of The Body Keeps the Score, wrote, "When fear becomes the norm, the brain freezes in the past. We keep living, but inside we remain trapped in the place of terror." This is the danger of fear. A person loses access to the present. They drive through life looking only in the rear-view mirror, seeing reality through the filter of old fear. I once knew a young woman raised by a critical mother. Whenever she spoke of her feelings, her mother dismissed them. Years later she realized she was terrified to talk about herself. Not because she had nothing to say, but because an old program lived inside: my feelings are weakness. Each time she tried to open up, her body stiffened. These are not just memories. They are imprints in the brain. Emotional patterns carved into neural pathways in childhood. The good news is that the brain is plastic. It can change. Back in the mid-20th century, the neuropsychologist Donald Hebb declared, "Neurons that fire together, wire together." Meaning that every time we choose new behavior, new pathways strengthen. If you speak even when afraid, you rewire your brain. If you act despite trembling knees, you weaken old circuits. Try this: every morning, take 5 minutes and write, "What am I afraid of today?" Then add, "What will I do anyway?" You do not need to defeat fear. You can live with it, and move forward. The philosopher Spinoza once said, "Freedom is the recognition of necessity." If we understand that fear lives in us as a form of protection, then we can respect it, without obeying it. Fear can be a compass. It often points precisely toward the direction of growth. Where fear lies, freedom often hides. A man once dreamed of being an artist. For 20 years he worked in an office. At night he painted in secret, hiding his drawings in a drawer. Only when he fell ill did he dare exhibit them. He was 52. He confessed, "I was afraid of being nobody. But scarier still was the thought of living my life as someone I am not." That phrase remained on the gallery wall. It made people cry who never cry. We fear rejection, ridicule, failure. But if you look deeper, we fear being alive. Because to be alive is to be vulnerable. To feel. To err. To suffer. But therein lies our strength. The biologist Robert Sapolsky once wrote, "The human body under stress mobilizes to fight. But if stress finds no outlet, the body destroys itself." Fear demands movement. Expression. If we compress it, it becomes chronic pain, apathy, exhaustion without cause. If we let it pass, it transforms into fuel. So take this rule: every time you feel fear, do not run. Say to yourself, "Here you are. I see you." Breathe deeply. Speak it. Or write it. Fear gains form, and loses its grip. This is not a quick path. But each step toward truth, however small, is a step toward yourself. And when you are closer to yourself, you are closer to life. Not survival, but true, living life. And if these ideas resonate with you, take a moment to support this journey. Subscribe to this channel, share this video with someone who might need it, and let me know in the comments, what fear has shaped your life the most. Because sometimes, naming it is already the beginning of freedom. What if fear does not simply live inside you, but reshapes the very architecture of your brain? Neuroscience shows that when fear is activated, the brain changes not only functionally but also structurally. In the limbic system, specifically in the amygdala, our ancient threat detector, activity rises sharply. This is the part of the brain that once saved our ancestors by detecting a predator in the shadows and triggering an instant survival response. The problem is that in the modern world, the amygdala is not triggered only by real threats like an attacking animal. It reacts just as strongly to an email from your boss, to rejection from someone you love, to financial stress, and even to your own racing thoughts. Researchers at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology discovered that in people living with chronic fear, the communication between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex is disrupted. The prefrontal cortex is the region that governs reason, conscious decision-making, and willpower. In other words, when fear dominates, we do not simply feel nervous. We lose access to rational thought. We begin to act not from clarity or meaning, but from avoidance. We choose what hurts less, not what matters more. And this is the trap. When fear becomes the lens through which we see reality, we stop noticing opportunities. We see only threats, even where none exist. We reject change, not because it is wrong, but because it is unfamiliar. The brain that is trained in fear learns to avoid everything that might trigger it, including new relationships, ambitions, and growth. At Harvard Medical School, researchers designed an experiment. People were asked to give a speech before an audience. In some participants, scientists stimulated the brain areas associated with confidence. In others, they stimulated the amygdala associated with fear. The results were striking. Those in the confidence group spoke clearly, remembered more, and appeared persuasive. Those in the fear group stumbled, forgot their lines, and lost their train of thought. The same task, the same person, but a completely different outcome depending on who was behind the wheel and the brain. Maybe you have felt this yourself. You want to make a decision, you want to speak up, you want to take a step forward, but an invisible barrier holds you back. On the surface, everything seems reasonable. Inside, a soft whisper rises: what if you fail? What if you regret it? Better not risk it. That whisper is fear. The neuropsychologist Jonathan Haidt once told the story of a man who dreamed of writing a book. He sat down dozens of times, opened his notebook, but always found something else to do. He convinced himself he was too busy. Deep inside, he knew the truth. He was not busy, he was afraid. If he wrote and failed, it would prove he was not good enough. But as long as he did not write, he could still believe in his potential greatness. Fear kept him not in defeat, but in illusion. This is how millions of people live. We fear failure, so we never begin. We fear success, so we sabotage ourselves. We fear being our authentic selves, so we play roles. We fear loneliness, so we remain in destructive relationships. Fear chains us to the past and to imagined futures, robbing us of the present. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard described fear as the dizziness of freedom. We fear because in front of us lies freedom of choice, and with freedom comes responsibility. In this sense, fear is not always an enemy. It is a mirror, showing us where we are not yet free, where we still live by the script of fear instead of by our own will. So how do we step out of fear's shadow? The first key is awareness. Noticing, this is not reason speaking, this is fear. The moment we see it, choice returns. Awareness is the pause between stimulus and response. And inside that pause lies freedom. At Stanford, neuroscientists showed that regular meditation reduces amygdala activity and strengthens its connection with the prefrontal cortex. In plain words, meditation returns the driver's seat to us. It is not only relaxation, it is training the brain to react less blindly and more consciously. Here is a simple exercise. When you feel anxiety rising, ask yourself 3 questions. What do I feel? What do I fear? What am I avoiding? These questions cut through the fog and bring you back to the root. Often you will find that you are not afraid of the situation itself, but of your interpretation of it. Another powerful skill is psychological flexibility, the ability to hold both fear and purpose in the same mind. It is not about erasing fear, but about walking with it. To say, yes, I am afraid, but this does not stop me. As the writer Stephen Pressfield once said, the power is not in being unafraid, but in acting in spite of fear. Almost every great story is a story of facing fear. Malala Yousafzai, who spoke out for girls' education despite threats. Viktor Frankl, who preserved meaning even in a concentration camp. Or perhaps your own story, the moment you dared something that made you tremble, but found yourself alive in the process. When we stop obeying fear and begin listening to it, it transforms into a guide. It points to where growth begins. Behind every fear lies hidden strength. Behind every panic, the wish to be whole. Behind every anxiety, the call to awareness. One woman shared her story of a painful divorce. For years she could not leave. She feared loneliness. She feared destroying her children's lives. She feared judgment. But most of all, she feared admitting to herself that she was deeply unhappy. Every day she wore the mask of the perfect wife, secretly hoping someone else would make the choice for her. When she finally left, she was shaking with terror. Yet a few months later, she said, "For the first time, I can breathe." She was not suddenly happy. But she was real. Fear can keep life safe, but false. To be alive is not about guarantees, it is about authenticity. To feel pain and joy without hiding. The research of Brené Brown shows that resilience is not born from control but from vulnerability. The people who endure best are not those who eliminate fear, but those who can admit, "I am scared. I do not know. I am uncertain." That is the essence of maturity, not fighting fear away, but allowing it without giving it the wheel. Fear wears many masks. Perfectionism, endless control, procrastination, anxiety. We tell ourselves, "I just need to prepare better," but beneath that is fear of judgment. We say, "I must calculate more," but beneath that is fear of mistakes. Beneath all the masks, it is the same fear of not being enough, of being rejected, of losing control. What if we stopped running? What if we said, "Yes, I am afraid," and that is not shameful? Fear does not make us weak. It makes us human. And when we listen to it, it stops being a monster in the dark. It becomes a voice showing us where we are tender, and therefore where we are most precious. One of the simplest tools is journaling. Write down what you fear and why. Do it without censorship. Psychologists have proven that labeling emotions reduces activity in the amygdala. Just by saying, "I am afraid because I fear failure," the brain shifts from panic mode to analysis mode. The next step is to ask, what will happen if I do this, despite fear? Not the ideal fantasy, but realistically. And what will happen if I do not? Often the answer is shocking. We realize that the cost of doing nothing is higher than the risk of acting. Professor Kelly McGonigal from Stanford writes that fear and desire are closely linked. Where there is strong fear, there is often strong longing. We fear speaking because we long to be heard. We fear love because we long to be accepted. Fear is the shadow side of passion. So maybe fear is not an obstacle but a portal. It points us to what matters most. Our task is not to destroy it, but to walk through it. To feel the tremor, and still move. As philosopher Alain de Botton put it, courage is the ability to do the important thing despite being afraid. No one lives without fear. But not everyone gives fear the final say. And here is another truth, fear grows stronger in isolation. When we hold it inside, it swells into a monster. But when we share it, when we see that others are afraid too, it shrinks. Honest conversations about fear are not weakness, they are strength. Harvard has been conducting a study on human happiness for more than 80 years. Its conclusion is simple: the quality of our relationships is the best predictor of a good life. And one of the keys to quality connection is the ability to be real, including in fear. So seek out people to whom you can say, "I am afraid," without being laughed at. Be that person for someone else. Because yes, being yourself is frightening. But losing yourself is far worse. And never forget this simple truth: you are not your fear. You are the one who sees it. You are the one who chooses. You can say, "Yes, I feel fear. But I move forward, because it matters. Because it is my life." Sometimes all it takes is one small step. One honest word. One break from the role you are playing. One breath of freedom. And things begin to shift. Fear does not vanish with a snap. It cannot simply be let go, as motivational slogans suggest. But it can be outgrown. It can be re-experienced. And here, therapy is not a luxury, it is a tool of liberation. So if this journey into the science of fear speaks to you, consider supporting this work. Subscribe to the channel, share this video with someone who might need it, and write in the comments, what is the fear you are ready to face? Your words may inspire someone else to take their first step. Because beyond fear lies not emptiness, but life itself.